National borders and state boundaries. They're sometimes determined by major geographic statements, sometimes invisible lines etched into the landscape. These borders that now shape Washington State and seem so familiar were actually a long time in the making and even edged America to the brink of war. Washington State was part of the land called Oregon Country in the early 1800s, and it stretched from the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. England and America jointly occupied the land, though it held valuable waterways and fertile soil, and each nation wanted to make it their own. Most of the American settlers lived south of the Columbia River and relied on the British to govern the area. With time, the American pioneers grew tired of this arrangement and pressed for sole control of the region and the expulsion of the British. It was 1844 when presidential candidate James Polk issued the rallying cry, 54-40 or fight. He hoped to extend American control to the 54th parallel, what is now the southern tip of Alaska. The English wanted the border to follow the Columbia River. A compromise was reached, and instead the line was drawn at the 49th parallel, today's Washington-Canadian border. But the conflict over the international boundary wasn't over. A new problem surrounded the San Juan Islands, a seemingly minor detail compared with the land that had already been divided up. But maps of the islands were imprecise, and the new agreement between the Americans and British described the boundary as the middle of the channel which separates the continent from Vancouver's Island. But which channel? Was it the channel that ran along Haro Strait, or was it the waters of Rosario Strait? Who owned the San Juan Islands? Again, unable to settle their differences, the two countries lived with joint occupation. The British settled San Juan Island with 1,300 sheep, a few pigs, and a sheep herder. The Americans had a few farms. Each had small military bases, and they shared the land amicably, though reluctantly, until June 15, 1859, when an American farmer shot a British pig. The incident quickly became an international crisis. Each side increased their armies, poised for battle. Though no shots were ever fired, the incident became known as the Pig War. This standoff continued for almost 20 years. When it was finally resolved, the San Juans were declared American territory. The boundaries had finally been set. So on November 11, 1889, Washington became a state with a population of less than 200,000 people and boundaries that stretched from the Columbia River to the 49th parallel, including the San Juan Islands.